Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now we continue our coverage on the Iranian strikes on Israel. We're joined by Ruth Wasserman Lande, a former member of the Israeli parliament and a research fellow at the Moscow Institute for National Security. Ruth, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. So it's almost 24 hours since Iran launched what many are saying is the largest attack on its regional foe. Israel has now had time to assess the damage, and it seems their aerial defense was able to somewhat thwart the attack. But what do you make of all that took place 24 hours ago?
Well, I heard the former speaker actually say something that I cannot I cannot believe that I heard it, that Iran was targeting only military targets. As a mother who sat for hours in the shelter with her 4 kids and 2 dogs, there was not 1 millimeter of the entire country of Israel, from the north to the south, from the west to the east, that wasn't targeted by unprovoked missile barrage from the Islamic Republic of Iran against every single civilian in this country, by the way, including Arab civilians, which make up 25% of the population.
So how is the situation post what we saw yesterday and many have been reporting on?
The situation is that the Islamic Republic of Iran has created a wall of fire surrounding Israel by funding and training and inciting proxies instead of fighting its own war. And this was the second time that Iran, or rather the Islamic Republic of Iran, not the Iranian people, with whom we have no antagonism at all, have actually targeted Israel directly. The first time was in April, 300 missiles, none of which actually landed anywhere because of Israel's extended anti-missile technology and the aid of like-minded countries in the region. By the way, many of them Muslim, because they cannot stand the attempt, and the very overt attempt by the Islamic Republic of Iran to overtake these countries. And by the way, these countries, and this is the modus vivendi of the Islamic Republic, to disintegrate countries from within and then to come in. They've done this in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon with the Hezbollah. They've done this with the Shiite militias in Syria. They've basically taken over the entire Iraq. There's no longer an Iraq, but Shiite militias belonging to Iran in Iraq. And they've been trying to do this with Jordan for the past several years as well.
Now, Ruth, granted the aerial defense has been great, but some analysts are now saying Iran has sophisticated weaponry. If they wanted to inflict serious harm, they would have done so, suggesting that this was possibly symbolic and a moment to assert themselves because they've got their own domestic issues, and to also reach allies, to tell them that we're still in control, we're not a pushover. So they're of the view that if they wanted, they could have.
Well, to whoever is saying that this is a symbolic act, I would invite them to sit with me for 4 or 5 hours with 4 small children and 2 dogs. And honestly, because of my government's insistence that every house will not get a permit unless they have a shelter, plus the aerial technology, take a chance. Please come, be my guest, come and take the symbolic act of really the entire land of Israel, from bottom to top, with the grandmothers and the babies. I don't see anything symbolic in it. I see it as pure evil against a completely unprovoked. By the way, we have no war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. We do have a war only with those that carnage, rape, murder, and burn our people, like happened by the Hamas from Gaza that entered unprovoked our territory and mass murdered our people, and exactly the same what the Hezbollah has been planning to do. By the way, they have the plans to do exactly the same thing, which is the only reason why our soldiers have gone into Lebanon to dismantle the tunnels that are their sole purpose is not to protect Lebanon, but to literally come to our border and massacre, rape, murder, and burn our people inside Israel proper.
Now, Ruth, the UN Security Council has locked in an emergency meeting on the escalating situation. Do you think these talks could yield positive results? Because many have criticized the UN Security Council for years. Do you think these specific emergency talks could lead to a cessation of hostilities?
So I'll be very frank with you, because I have great respect for the people of South Africa, and I think that they should hear, other views, not only the same views all the time. The United Nations, as the lady that spoke before me has said, was created in order to maintain peace, correctly so, after Second World War, when millions and millions of Jews had been massacred. What has happened to the United Nations when 11 months from the 8th of October, the Hezbollah, a designated terrorist organization, not by Israel, but by many Western countries, because they've massacred Syrian people, they've massacred non-Shiite Muslims, they've massacred Lebanese people and so on. They've been barraging and throwing rockets and missiles on Israelis for 11 whole months. Where was the United Nations then to maintain the peace? How on earth is it possible that the second
But we heard the United Nations condemn the attacks. The United Nations at every turn has been condemning the attacks and has always been calling for a de-escalation.
No.
Unless perhaps just the call for peace, perhaps the call for peace was not enough. You expected more beyond that?
No, my apologies. There was no condemnation of the Hezbollah 11-month attacks, and there was no emergency meeting by the United Nations and no condemnation by Guterres saying that this is improper and cannot continue because Israel is a sovereign country. Can you possibly imagine South Africa being bombarded by incessantly for 11 whole months, and mothers and children going into the shelters for 11 whole months, and the United Nations, which is supposedly a peacekeeping body, doing absolutely nothing whatsoever? And the second that South Africa would retaliate to stop this barrage of rockets, suddenly an emergency meeting would come up, and peace and a ceasefire would be in need. It boggles the mind completely.
Well, we'll most certainly keep a close eye as to what comes out of that meeting. Thank you very much, Ruth, for joining us this afternoon. That's Ruth Wasserman Lande, a former member of the Israeli parliament and a research fellow at the Masgav Institute for National Security, speaking to us there from Tel Aviv. We'll bring you more on the story as it continues to develop.